tensions between tenants and landlords is something that's been around since the ancient era, leaving landlords with essentially two options: show mercy and work with the tenant, or go straight to strict enforcement. And now in modern times, given the pandemic and everything going on, as much as 1/3 of Americans are going to be having trouble actually paying their rent, meaning that this relationship is going to get pretty heated. So how are the tenant and the landlord going to be able to get through this rough patch together? Because it's not like the landlord can actually evict them right now, and then I'm pretty sure that the tenant wants to keep living there. So what are they going to do? Are they going to do payment plans, like deferments, stimulus, donate blood? I mean, how bad is the situation really? Because frankly, these articles that I keep reading are actually pretty general and pretty flawed. And as a real estate broker who's with a property management company that manages about 1,000 properties, we are going through this situation literally thousands of times with our thousands of tenants. So I'm going to be able to provide you with some actual data here. And it's actually important to understand that this situation between tenant and landlord is actually a little bit more evolved than those ancient times, because both the tenant and the landlord are now stuck in a situation that they couldn't have foreseen, and they're trapped in this situation. And so the concept that I'm also going to be covering in this video is something from game theory, which is called the prisoner's dilemma. And with unemployment reaching over 30 million people, which is actually above the population of the state of Texas, understanding this concept is going to be really important. The prisoner's dilemma is a concept where at least two people, the tenant and the landlord, both have an option to either work with or work against the other party. And if they were to work completely for themselves while at the same time the other person decides to be very giving, then the selfish person would actually really get ahead, or vice versa. But if both of them decide to do the selfish thing, then actually both of them will get behind. However, if they decide to actually work with one another, then they will both get ahead. And therefore, the dilemma: do you actually try to work with this person, or do you try to go completely on your own to ensure that you get ahead because, hey, they might not do it? As a landlord, do you try to push these people as hard as you can to ensure that you get your rent? Or as a tenant, do you decide to inflate your problems to the point where you try to give your landlord absolutely nothing? Or do you two decide to come together to where the property is still properly run and the tenant has a place to live? And one thing that's actually nice to know about people who actually have been in the prisoner's dilemma is that most people actually end up working with the other side instead of just trying to hack the other one over the head. And by working together in these truly tough times, maybe finally, once and for all, the tenant and the landlord can live happily ever after. So the basic average of what we're reading in the papers is basically 1/3 of tenants are not able to pay their rents. But in our data of about 1,000 properties, we have a rent collection rate of 88%. Now, why is that so much different? Well, there's a few reasons. One is this whole third scenario is really general, and we need to break that down because there's a lot of different types of tenants, a lot of different socioeconomic levels, and they have different types of jobs. So the most affected properties and the most affected tenants having trouble paying the rent are actually college students and people working in the service industry or in the tourism industry. And the places that have been hit the least have actually been single-family homes, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and apartment complexes that are a little bit, higher end, because those people generally have more stable jobs, are more likely to be able to work from home, and have a bigger savings account, allowing them to actually weather these more difficult times. All right, so that's the general situation, but how are the landlords and the tenants actually going to be able to work together with one another? Well, the very first step is know all of the options that are available to both of you so that you can interact with each other. So actually, landlords, I'm going to start with one thing for you guys, but tenants need to listen to this one so that you're aware that this is an option for landlords if they actually do need to take it. And this might sound a little bit extreme, but there is mortgage forbearance programs for rental properties. In fact, I actually did a video on it here. But the broad stroke is you can go a few months without actually having to pay your mortgage, which should be able to alleviate a lot of the expenses. Now, it's not going to get rid of everything. Obviously, say tenants, it's not going to get rid of everything for them. They're still going to have property taxes that they're essentially going to have to pay someday. I mean, the pool doesn't fill itself. If anything breaks, they still got to pay for those maintenance calls. So this is not a silver bullet. And they're going to have to pay that mortgage eventually. So this isn't free money for them. But this does give potentially both of you guys a little bit of breathing room to help huddle and figure this out. Now, one thing that's really great for the tenants and the landlords, if they're paying the utilities, is that a lot of utility companies will actually defer the payments later as well, which will also give you guys a little bit more breathing room. So you just go to your power company. A lot of them will have payment assistant programs. It'll be named something like that. You go there, you click it, you learn about the program for your power and your water and maybe your gas if you have it. A thing that's specifically important for a lot of the tenants, that if you have been unemployed, you really need to apply for unemployment. Now, I'm sure you've heard of that one, but in this video, I actually go in depth on unemployment. This one was actually relatively popular of mine, so give that one a little go. It will actually talk about the federal unemployment and the state unemployment, because a lot of people will end up getting the state, but like, wait, where's my federal? All this, and that's worth a lot of extra money. So take a look at that. If you really are out of a job, you really don't have any money, like the amount that's coming in just for whatever reason just isn't gonna cut it, there are programs usually led by religious institutions that will help you out. Some of the bigger ones are like Salvation Army. Now, there are actually a lot of other programs out there that aren't directly related to real estate, but will really affect your budget in a positive way if you choose to use them. The first one is, a lot of car companies have made it to where you actually don't need to make car payments for the next few months. So you really do want to check into that if you do have a car payment. Another thing that's really common is anything digital, online subscriptions to newspapers or software or editing software have actually been made to where if you request it, you don't have to pay for it for 30, 60, 90 days. And if you have a few of them, that could actually add up. All right, so now let's take all this information and put it together to where this is actually going to maximize the benefit when you guys actually start making a plan. The first step, as you might imagine, is actually inform each other of this plan. And actually, the way that I did it is we did it through a landlord letter of saying, okay, here is what we know, here are the programs, here's the specific power company, here's the specific water company that you guys use. These are the deferment programs that we are aware of with them, and we give them the links, they click it, boom, they're right there. And you can do the same. And then once you guys start communicating and you start to realize, okay, this tenant is actually having a real situation, well, then you actually need to start talking about a payment program where they're not actually going to be paying the entire rent every single month. Okay, because a lot of the times someone can pay some amount of the rent. And tenants, I know it's tempting to go, okay, I don't want to pay the entire month for 3 months, but know that in like no situation almost is all of the rent going to be forgiven. In fact, this can actually hurt you as well, because remember, a lot of the landlords are not sitting on a giant cash pile of money. And if there is no budget to fix the property, and if stuff is breaking in your place and there's no money to do it, well, now you're both in a bad situation, because the landlord's property is getting worse and you're having to live in it. That's not good. And you know, he needs to make sure that the place is still operating. And if there's like 50 tenants there and no one's paying, you can start to see how the bills are really piling up. And so what we did with a lot of people, we tell them, okay, do you still have some form of income coming in? Is it coming every 2 weeks? Is it coming monthly? We would note this and we'd be like, all right, you don't have to pay any rent for the next 2 weeks at all. Don't worry about it. No late fees. We're not gonna find this new fancy way of evicting people through this letter through a lawyer or something that I've been hearing about, which is, by the way, a really bad idea, landlords. We'll go into that in a second. But what we will do is you'll just pay it. You'll pay maybe $300 a month. We'll keep it going for now. And then once we get back to normal, your rent's $1,000 a month, we'll just tack on an extra $200-300 a month, whatever this individual tenant is able to afford, right? And at the same time makes sense for the landlord. And we would extend it out 10 months, okay? We extend it out 10 months where you have 10 months to pay back 3 months, which, should be somewhat reasonably doable, because a lot of people are not supposed to be going over 25 or a third of their entire income. So for the most part, if you're needing to budget, which really everyone needs to, this is generally an achievable goal for most of the people that you'll have to be working with. Okay, so that's for the general plan. You have a payment plan, you have your deferment programs that are available to both of you. You understand that, the stimulus packages are coming in and how you're going to utilize them. You should have a conversation about those checks and how much, can really be put together. The last part about this plan is get ahead of it. If you haven't already put this together, or if it hasn't really been made, solid, you should try to start thinking 3, 4, 6 months ahead of time in order to maximize the actual value of this plan. Because if you're not going to be able to make rent this month or the next month, that's going to be an issue for you or the landlord if they're depending on that money to maybe fix this, or that you don't know the situation of either side. So get ahead of it. And if you know for a fact there's just going to be no way out, then just try to find a way to work with them of like, okay, I'll pay this and this, and even if you won't let me stay, I'll pay you this much. Just don't hit my credit. Don't hit my rental history. We just leave each other alone at minimum if I give you this much for those however many months, and get ahead of actually looking for a new place so that you can actually live with another management company that actually treats you with a little bit more dignity. And treating the other side with dignity really is the way to go in this prisoner's dilemma. If you guys know of extra stuff that I didn't even, list, then put it down in the comments. That would actually be really helpful.